Hey everyone, my name is Airon White, and I'm a manager of product marketing here at BigCommerce. And today with me, I have BigCommerce's Vice President of Cybersecurity, Dan Holden. Dan has more than 25 years of experience across cybersecurity and IT industries as a technology innovator and is recognized as a cybersecurity expert. In honor of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we want to empower merchants with strategies on how to establish a strong security culture within their organization. But of course, we want to emphasize that cybersecurity matters all year long, so the information we're sharing today is always relevant. According to a Forrester Consulting study on the relationship between IT, security, and development teams, 52% of developers believe that cybersecurity policies are a barrier to innovation, which goes to show that there's often a gap in collaboration between security teams and developers. So how do we bridge this gap? By developing strong relationships between security teams and partner organizations. And that's the topic we're diving into today. First off, why do relationships with IT and engineering teams and security teams often not work?
I would say it's fairly simplistic to say, very difficult to fix or solve. It's like any other relationship, expectation setting. So it doesn't matter whether it's personal or professional, it's really what your expectation of the other side is. I would say, especially with size of the organization can affect these things because, of course, then you've got more moving parts. But the good part about, let's take compliance as an example, is everyone has to do it. And so, while compliance might have began as something painful, whether it's PCI or ISO, pick whatever you like, it's also making an even playing field, meaning every company now has to budget for them and also has to figure out these processes. Right. So it's not something you can escape. Everyone has to figure it out. And the moment everyone's at the same level in terms of having to figure that out, having to meet those levels of compliance, it means, it is a process, it has to be a relationship.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So what would be the first step to help bridging that? Should that be somebody on the security team, reaching out to an IT leader to talk about the relationship that they want to have and how they can share it across their teams? Like, what are ways that our customers can start establishing those relationships and make them strong to start off with?
I think with larger organizations, unfortunately, it generally happens due to compliance and auditing, which is potentially part of the problem. Sure. Meaning you've got someone showing up and it's a forceful decree, right? It's a business need that has to happen. Right. But that also means it's potentially unplanned work because the expectation wasn't set, and therefore you're throwing someone else's schedule off, or you're throwing off the resources that they had planned. So I would say don't let that happen, since that's what generally does happen. Generally speaking, it is security probably reaching out in most examples. If it's the other way around, certainly it's better. The interesting thing about a lot of the recent breaches, I think, is they're not necessarily after that particular company. They're after the data of that company in order to leverage it against another. And so what historically perhaps weren't the most targeted aspects of a company, historically it might have been more technology focused, engineering focused, lots of different, or more customer level of interest. Now it's, third party and supply chain is a huge aspect of the threat landscape. And from the attacker standpoint, that has now become a very attractive aspect. So my point to all of that is, every aspect of a company now matters. It's not just what you would have traditionally thought of as I want the customer information from a database. No, they want what's in your CRM just as much as they might want anything else that the company might have. So now it's not a game of reducing your attack surface or scope or anything like that. It's really about, from a security standpoint, it all matters. Because now the threat landscape has matured to the point that it all matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can customers do to build out those strong relationships so that the security teams and the IT teams are locked arms, ready to go with a plan of action as they bring in sales and marketing and others within their organizations to support those initiatives? So in that landscape view, what can they do to build those strong relationships?
Yeah, I'll give a few examples. I'll start with engineering because I think it's the more classic case. I very much view application security as quality assurance or quality control for engineering and development. And so if you agree with that approach, then I think it makes a lot of sense to essentially integrate yourself with their process and set the expectations that when you throw a vulnerability over the fence, so to speak, that it is the exact same level of detail that they would be expecting if they themselves had found a bug. In other words, a bug that is a feature, a security vulnerability should be treated just the same.
Right.
And you have to be a partner providing that. I have seen very, very substantial, Fortune level programs where there just simply isn't a good handoff. And the more and more exchange you have to have, right? That's why everybody, false positives and AppSec are such an issue. The more and more back and forth you have to have, the more time consuming it is, the more energy expended. And you want to be as fast as you can be, whether it's defending against attackers or whether it's, fixing bugs, And so again, the expectation has to be there. In other words, security should not dictate the way a ticket looks. The developers probably should, meaning, again, you need to be delivering the same level. Sounds simple. Again, easy to say, hard to do.
Right. So if you're degrading by playing this kind of game of telephone, what kind of main components of information need to kind of be consistent along the way? If you start off with engineering and it needs to go through the chain, what does that need to look like?
Basically, whatever their expectation. Same thing. If they've found a bug internally, the level of detail they're used to, the level of understanding for the tools, the process, all of those things. With IT, it can be a bit different. I think with IT, it's more of a two-way street, mainly because you've got to scale. So the issue with IT or infrastructure of any type, again, if you're throwing 10,000 vulnerabilities over the fence and you're saying, hey, these need to be patched due to all sorts of various risks, severities, compliance, whatever the driver might be, IT has to have process or infrastructure has to have process around that. And so it's very much a two-way street because then you're both trying to figure out what is the best way to do it. So it's more on the infrastructure side to figure out a way to automate that sort of thing and make it easiest on themselves because security is not typically in a position to make patching easier. They're in a position of providing you more vulnerabilities to patch. So that is something that I think both sides have to really work on in order to figure out scale. And to your statistic earlier around developers or anyone in a company feeling like security is kind of fencing them in or being draconian. The whole point is to reduce risk and reduce that attack surface. But at the same time, security is always worried about being a business enabler, and not being the Department of No. And so there's an interesting balance, and I think that balance is different for every company. Frankly, it starts at the board and works its way down, meaning that there has to be a level of risk tolerance kind of established. That is also easy to say, hard to do. In that case, I'd say a common language, a way to communicate with each other. It can't be at the low levels of technology. It really has to do with what are we willing to accept versus what we're not. And use cases and stories are probably a better way to tackle that, especially with, frankly, as many breaches as happen. Mm-hmm. There's lots of use cases, I think, to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're working together, both security and product marketing, I know one of the initiatives we're working on is to make security more approachable, more consumable by all teams, by all audiences. And that, to me, will foster those stronger relationships. So trying to find that common language, I think, is super important where, you're talking about incidents and different things that different teams have to respond to, but my marketing and sales counterparts may not quite understand what an incident might be, using some of that more technical language. So how do we help strengthen relationships that may not be nearly as technical, but still get across that importance of security and how everybody is that agent for security and can become that cybersecurity champion?
Yeah, and that's a really tough one that is constantly debated. The question always is, to what extent do you do education versus technology-based controls? Again, the feeling that you're being fenced in, or that sort of thing. And so there's again a balance that has to kind of be struck with each company, and that also changes over time. It also changes depending on risk. the way a pre-breach company versus a post-breach company reacts is generally quite different, right? I would say, the fun part about security are the stories from the trenches, so to speak. And I think if you're in a position where you can tell some of those stories, it can be fun. People might be interested in security. I think that's what you're always looking for is champions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sharing those fun stories is a way to get those champions.
Yeah, and it works in any department. People have that with application security in the developer ranks. Yeah. I think at BC, we've shown that we have the exact same level of interest in marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know there's so many teams out there that are saying, hey, how do I get involved? We have training videos that we go through to make sure that everybody is aware of what protocols and procedures we should follow internally and reporting, phishing, all of those things. And I think that having that really human element is super important versus let me just read a blog and click a questionnaire. I like having that interactive and exploring what those options might look like.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of tabletop exercises. There's nothing more educational than an incident.
We don't want incidents, though, Dan.
Right. No, nobody wants incidents. So I think tabletops are a pretty good way to do that, or at least having a conversation around it, right? Because sales is probably not used to an incident. So if they get pulled into one, that's probably a completely new experience. Right. What should they expect? What's the responsibility on my side? Yeah. Again, that's going to change, be different with every company and size and that sort of thing. But if you can involve, the external entities, your peers and partners in that to whatever extent is possible, I mean, that's how people learn. You don't learn from getting things right. You learn from getting things wrong. Yeah, and that's how experience works. And so I think looking for ways not to be this black box, ivory tower sort of situation where security is a team is a bad way to do it. Look at security as a function and everybody's involved in it. And I think that's the only way to win, frankly, because security is getting harder, not easier. It is just the iteration of technology at this point is so fast, and we're all moving so fast as humans, as businesses. It's something that has to be pushed down to every employee, every function. And the more you're doing that, the more you're talking about it, the more you're getting feedback. I think, that's the other issue is the more and more security is separated from those functions, the less they have empathy and feeling for what that relationship should be. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's very much a two-way street, and you want to arrive at a good balanced answer, not one that has one party feeling, slighted or stuck or, in a corner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we want to make sure that all of the different teams that work together know that security as a team is approachable and is here to help and to support, not put up blockers, not, keep everybody away from their jobs and being successful. It's about let's team together and enable all of us to be on top of it so that if we do have an incident, something does happen, it's not as bad as it possibly could be because we're prepared. Lots of people have emergency preparedness. They have escape routes for fire drills. Yeah. That's something that everybody has to consider within business as well, is what do we do if something happens?
Yeah, I think at BC we've really done a good job of creating what I call a healthy paranoia.
Yes, everybody is healthily paranoid thanks to you, Dan.
Right, everybody
the rest of your team.
and that's kind of the place to start, meaning anyone in the company should be empowered to essentially almost create or kick off an incident by simply asking a question. Yeah. And so, you've got to I think you've got to have a level of there are no, stupid questions, have that healthy paranoia. Right. We're here to support that. When things are as difficult as they are with security, and I think the good part is everybody is now aware. 15 years ago, not so much. Now we all have to deal with it even at an individual level. We all read about it. So it's a very known aspect at this point. So don't shy away from it, support it, and then, allow your employees to be your greatest security control. Yep. And that's not just education. It is the relationships, which is why everybody talks about it. But it's easy to have the click-through videos. It's harder to actually build those relationships. And so, in other words, I don't want to saying the same thing everyone else is saying, but it does matter, and it matters at every level, at every level of the company, especially the ones that are customer facing.
Yeah,
so your sales and support are, your front lines of defense, frankly, because they're the ones that are communicating with your customers and partners the most.
Yeah, and I think one thing that your team has really done well to make security approachable and enable and empower everyone else in the organization is having an open door, having a Slack channel that is just for security, that anyone can go in and pose a question and get a quick response. Since we are global, we have folks all over the world to respond quickly and accurately and in a way that makes us feel good for asking that question rather than kind of feeling dumb. Sometimes you think, is this really a phishing email? I don't know. And your team is so good about the education component and say, hey, thanks for sending this over. Yeah. We'll take a look at it. You did a good thing, click it as phishing, or hey, no, that's actually a real thing. So I think that that's something that our customers' teams can take away from this conversation even is security is not scary, but you make it so that it's approachable. We're empowered to say something if we're concerned or see something, we're not sure what to do. You all make it so much more approachable. And then I think that when you're bringing in an IT, engineering, sales, marketing, support, name your division, it helps us all just be even that much stronger. I could be on a call with somebody in our product engineering organization, and we might be talking about a security challenge or something new that we're building. We say, hey, let's bring in somebody from the security team, and I know I can add them to a meeting, brief them, and they're going to bring so much information and make us feel good.
It's not going to be painful.
It's not going to be painful, yeah.
I appreciate that, Airon. That's the nicest thing anybody will say to me today. We do go out of our way to enable that, mainly because, I think, in previous decades, it certainly wasn't like that, and technologists, historically have enjoyed being elitist and gatekeeping and holding it over folks' head. Security can't be won that way, and tech is so ubiquitous at this point. It's also being the abstraction layers we've got it at is completely different, meaning technology is not the inhibitor that it was, right? That aspect of the conversation is not what's holding any of us back.
Right.
It really is the human aspect that can get in the way, the political aspect.
Sure.
And so, yeah, you're right. The moment you have to bring in an external team and you're like, okay, well, how much time is this going to add? How many roadblocks are going to be thrown up?
Yep.
There's the reputation aspect, which every org has. And so the moment you need to start cross-collaborating, which is what IT and security both do constantly, you better have a pretty good attitude, or you're gonna turn people away, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. People will say, you know what, maybe we'll talk about security and we'll beg for forgiveness later, which is not where we want people to go. You want to bring them in early.
It puts you in the shadow IT trap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're trying to do our job. You all get in our way, so we're going to shut you out.
Right.
And that is the shadow IT trap, as opposed to, I think IT and security being more proactive and going out to those functions and saying, hey, what software are you using? What support do you need? Now, everybody's got, resource constraints and all of those things, but the difference between understanding and delivering are two different things.
Sure.
Delivering might take a very long time. Understanding does not take that long.
No.
And so, you start there and you work your way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, do you have any parting thoughts for our viewers today? Anything you want to send them
I'd
off
say,
to?
All of this is fine and dandy, especially if you're practitioners like us,
right.
But what's it matter from our customer standpoint? And I think that's the part that marketing especially focuses on is how does this matter to our customer base? I think if you do end up getting all this right, you've got a level of care and priority, and trust that builds up over time. And then hopefully eventually security is not hard, and it is people always talk about how you bake in security. If it's top of mind for everybody, I think that's really where the baked in portion comes from. Meaning it's not technology that we need to get security baked into at every level. It's mentally. So if everybody has a healthy level of paranoia, then you've got questions, then you've got opportunities for those relationships. So it's a domino effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see security as, if we're talking about baking things in here, healthy level of paranoia. Security is the chocolate chip in my chocolate chip cookie. It's not a chocolate chip cookie without it, and successful businesses aren't fairly successful without a good security and infrastructure team behind it. So I think that key takeaway: make sure you have chocolate chips in your cookies.
I've used
if
a lot
you're
of
chocolate lover.
yeah, I've used a lot of analogies. Never that one, but I'll steal it.
I am here to help.
Yeah,
Product
it's a good
marketing
one.
at your service, Dan. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you like what you heard today, please join us for more insights from our thought leaders like Dan. Be sure to check out the BigCommerce blog, our social channels, lots of other places for more content for all things cybersecurity. And we wish you a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.